Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm just going to give it a few seconds for those of us who are just gathering in. Good evening, everyone. My name is Millicent Matthews, and I am the manager of traveling exhibitions at the Newark Museum of Art. And I am so very excited to welcome you all to another edition of our virtual studio tour. Please note that throughout tonight's program, if you have any questions, please type them in the Q&A or comments below. We will try to get to as many as we can. In the chat below, please let us know where you're joining us from tonight. We have a very exciting program for you all, as I am joined by the acclaimed and local New Jersey artist, Kevin Sampson. Good evening, Kevin, and welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
Oh, fine, thank you.
It's such a pleasure to have you here. And I'd like to give your bio to those who may not be familiar with you before we start our program with you tonight. Kevin Blythe Sampson is a sculptor, painter, and muralist that is recognized for tackling difficult issues that concern him. Kevin Blythe Sampson was born in Elizabeth, New Jersey. Kevin became a police officer and detective for the city of Scotch Plains, New Jersey, where he served for over 19 years before taking retirement after the loss of his wife to raise his children. He was the first African-American uniform composite sketch artist in the country, and he received numerous commendations for his drawings and a Medal of Valor for his service as a detective. Kevin's father was a community leader and civil rights activist, both in Elizabeth, New Jersey and other parts of the state. Kevin grew up in a household where many of the local marches were planned and many national leaders would meet his father. Some of these leaders and illustrious folks included Ruby Dee, Ozzie Davis, William Kunstler, Dick Gregory, Robert Ferris Thomas, and Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm, who became a mentor of his father. This had a strong effect on Kevin, both his art and his life. He has been a gallery artist with the Calvin Morris Gallery in New York since 1992, delving fully into his art after making his retirement. Kevin has been teaching at various schools and institutions for over 30 years, including the Art in the City program at the Paul Robeson Gallery, located at Rutgers University in Newark, New Jersey. He is a mentor to many of Newark's youth and has assisted in a whole crop of young artists in obtaining admission into various art schools. His work is in numerous high-profile collections, including several museums, and also at the Newark Museum of Art. I'd like to take this time to welcome you again, Kevin, and thank you so much for allowing us access to your studio tour tonight. And we are really excited to learn more about how you create. Could you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got started in making art?
Well, I mean, I've always, made art, my whole life. I wanted to become an artist. My father wanted me to become something different, so he sent me to, he wanted me to go to college, which I did. I went to Lincoln University, a historically Black college. For a couple of years, came back. He said, boy, you're not doing nothing, join the police department. So I did. And when I joined the police department, my mother said, well, if you have to be a police officer, she took me to the post office to a wall that had wanted posters. And she said, well, if you have to be a police officer, you're going to do this. So eventually I went to school to become a composite sketch artist. But in the meantime, I was teaching. The whole time I was a police officer, I was also teaching at an art school. I was attending art school first, and then I began teaching at an art school, the Newark School of Fine and Industrial Art, which used to be above Arts High School. I taught there for 17 years.
Wow.
So, but I've always been an eccentric, and I've always been an artist on the inside at least.
Well, thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I wanted to also congratulate you. I had the pleasure, thanks to my 7-year-old nephew, to view your character portrayed, well, you portraying yourself as a cartoon character on the PBS cartoon Arthur, um, as the art teacher, teaching the kids how to assemble art with found objects, much like you do in your practice. Can you tell me how that came about? How did that opportunity happen?
Well, the creators of Arthur, Mark Brown and his wife, and I can't think of her name, God help me, his wife is actually an artist. And so she had seen my work and she was looking around for an artist to be on the show. So she called up a couple museums, and finally she called them American Museum of Folk Art, and they recommended me. So then I kind of auditioned and built up a relationship with the producer, Deborah Frank, and eventually they, gave me the job more or less. So I had to do the voiceover, which was easy. And most of my friends told me that I've always been a cartoon anyway. So it was wonderful. But I have a 7-year-old granddaughter. So the best part of it was, letting her see it. So she'll always have a
Yeah,
half of it. She can always, 20 years from now, she can see, Papa on screen. So it's a good thing.
definitely, definitely. That is really fascinating. That's fascinating. Well, why don't we take this time now and take a walk around your art studio? Would you mind showing us around?
Oh, no. Let's go right ahead.
Okay.
All right. I guess we'll be. All right. When you say art studio, this basically is my place. I live in a gigantic loft. I think this thing is more than 1,800 square feet. It's gigantic. But I filled the whole thing up to the hilt. And so this is a space inside, the central space inside of my place where more or less I store my work. I live here with my son, Jason. He lives on the other side. I live on this side. And in the middle of us is this space. These are a lot of these pieces, including this one, the metal one. I did that piece when I had the Marie War Sharp Foundation's space program, where they give you a space in New York, and that was about in 1993. So I used to walk along West Side Highway in New York, pick up junk, and make sculptures. Let me see. These are just various pieces. I made this piece. Oh, you can keep going. Keep going. And I mean, my place is packed to the gills with artwork. And this is not even 1/3 of what I really have. My gallery stores a lot of it. This, if you could hold up a second, it's moving too quick.
Should
This
we
is
go back a bit?
yeah, if you could back up. Too far. Forward. Well, we could go. This is my altar that I set up. People ask me what religion do I practice. I'm a Baptist, but this is just a nod to the other religions that do occur in the world. I'm a Baptist because I'm Black and I was born Elizabeth.
Yes.
If I was in the Middle East, I'd be a Muslim. If I was in Israel, I'd be a Jew, and if I was in someplace else, I'd be a Buddhist. This is a series of work that I did years ago. When I first moved to Newark, I lived on Chestnut Street. The art movement that's growing in Newark now, in my opinion, came out of Chestnut Street. In Chestnut Street, I lived with Willie Coles, Manuel Acevedo, Roy Cross. There was a whole bunch of us that lived in this factory complex.
Wow.
And everybody most of the artists around Newark at that time were hanging out in that complex. And so, I think that a lot of what is developing in Newark was here 30 years ago, and it'd be
Mhm.
great if the young people knew that. You know, what's going on in Newark now is not new.
Yeah, it's like they're saying, there's nothing new under the sun.
No, no, not at all. I mean, Newark had I mean, it wasn't as much of a hangout sort of place. It wasn't like an art scene. It was actually art. It was actually
Yes,
artists hiding out and making work, and fantastic work. I mean, look at Willie and Roy Cross and all those
yes,
that came out of it. And
yes.
as you can see, these are many sculptures that I've done, over the years. Um, it's hard to see it. I about 30 years ago, about 20 years ago, I got an interest in making boats and making vessels. And it initially was about the journey from this life into the afterlife. But since then, I've made so many boats that I've been invited in different parts of the country to actually, make boats. Not real boats, but boats out of found objects. I was
Yeah.
I was at the Mystic Seaport Museum 2 years ago. They let me live on a yacht for a month. I was able to collect materials from there. They gave me an old skiff, and I made a gigantic installation. So now I'm kind of known for making these boats, and I'm starting to make them in different parts of the country.
Wow, it's interesting.
And as you can see, I'm kind of prolific. You know, I
Yes.
worked I work almost constantly. I'm trying to see which ones we can zero on. As you go, if you can get ready to stop. I don't know if you can see the photo behind this boat. There's a photo of my father leading a demonstration in Elizabeth in 1964 for open housing. I'm a civil rights baby. So I grew up, I was on picket lines as soon as I could, before I could walk. My mother would, I would be in my mother's arms on picket lines. So my father is probably the biggest influence on my life. He was the proudest Black man that I've ever met in my whole life. And he instilled
Mhm.
that in all of us, and he instilled in us a commitment to community. So when I make these pieces of work, I normally go out in my community. I walk around Broad Street, hang out with people, find out what the needs are, what the problems are, what the hopes are, what
Mhm.
the dreams are. Jerry
Mhm.
Gant was, I taught Jerry Gant. I taught Jerry Gant at the Newark School of Fine and Industrial Art about 1982. He became,
Wow.
he became, more or less my brother. Me and Jerry
Yeah.
talked on the phone 3 or 4 times a week, every week until he died. And Jerry was the one that plugged me into Newark. He would take me around. If you could stop on this one, that's either my Bobby Seale poster or my brother's that we got in high school. We were big Black Panther fans, and then I became a cop. I don't know how to explain that, but it happened. But in any case, Jerry Gant, Manuel Acevedo, Rodney Gilbert, all of us were like kind of a crew that hung out and talked about many of Newark's problems for many, many years. When
Wow.
Rodney started the mural program, I was right there with Rodney. Rodney called me up 10 times a day because at that time, Rodney's a theater person, I'm an artist. So I helped him work the mural program.
Okay.
One thing about Rodney Gilbert was all about the community. It's very different in Newark now, but Rodney was about community.
Yes. Yes, it
He
is
did, he
very
didn't
different.
play, and it's different. A lot of what's going on now is business fueled, but Rodney was about the kids. He always was. Again, that's my father leading a demonstration about
Wow.
1964.
Do you remember any of the luminaries that would come to your home, or were you too young
If you
to
could hold on
realize
this.
who they were?
No, the one I remember most, the two, are Dick Gregory, who took the time I was a shy little kid. He took the time. I was waiting for him to come in, and he was led into the church where he's going to speak. I always helped my father set these things up. And
Yeah.
he was led in by 3 or 4 Black Panthers, and they were so cool. And Dick
Wow.
Gregory saw this shy little kid, and he came over and he sat with me for probably 10, 15 minutes, just making me laugh. And Shirley Chisholm came to dinner at our house quite frequently. So I remember Congresswoman Shirley Chisholm. she was a force of nature.
Yes, yes, yes.
There's
Incredible.
this picture here. There's a point in my life. My best friend Reynolds is a Brooklyn. She teaches at the Brooklyn Museum. She's just tall, loud, crazy, brilliant blonde from Maryland. But at the time, she was hanging with Malak, Malcolm X's daughter. So we were all hanging out
Yes.
together, me, Malak, and her. And I made this picture for Malak. But after I finished it, her mother died in that fire. And kind of vanished out of sight for a while. I've never been able to give it to her. So it's up on my wall now. And no, you're not getting Malak if you're watching it. What else are we doing? If you could stop again.
I like the paintings here.
The paintings
They're very
are,
colorful.
well, when COVID hit, I have, I'm a widower, so I'm very close to my kids. My daughter, by the way, is a director at the Innocence Project. My son is
Wonderful.
she was at Cooper Union. She was a vice president of the City Bar Fund of New York, but now she's been at the Innocence Project 2 or 3 years now. My son's a big manager who I live with, but my kids banned me from leaving the house. You're not picking up junk. My son, Jason, stopped me at the door. No, so they locked me down for probably a year. So I knew I couldn't collect materials anymore. Who wanted to touch anything?
Yeah, that's true.
Started. So I returned to painting, which is my real background. I graduated for illustration. Since the pandemic started, for the past year, I've created probably 70 paintings. And so nobody can believe I can paint that much, but what else does an old guy have to do when you're stuck in the house? So, I kick out a couple paintings every couple of days now.
Wow, that's incredible.
And I know I don't want to take too much time here, so we can. And these are just works that I've done over the years, from the late 80s until now. Some of the works, if you see anything that's ceramic, I got the best residency in the country, which is the Art and Industry residency at the Cola. It's probably the hardest residency in the universe. It almost killed me. But so anything you see ceramic laying around is from the Cola. And this piece, as you can see,
is this piece from the Cola?
The piece, anything ceramic besides the Jesus statues, this piece here, as you can see, is made of chicken bones for many, many years, and I still use bones. Bones is probably some of my favorite objects to use. My family collects them. So this piece is a guitar that's loaded with chicken bones. Why chicken bones? Because I believe objects retain memory. And so chicken bones are a family sitting around eating dinner and stuff. So my kids know. My kids are in their 40s. But anyway, sorry, Lauren, 36, and my son is 40. But anyway, the chicken bones, the kids know don't throw out any bones. My father would leave bags of bones on my porch, so I have a fascination with bones.
That's one thing I did wanted to ask you about, like, how did your process start of using, found objects that others may deem as, not usable anymore, or what's the word I'm looking for? Rejected objects, and you reclaim them and make these beautiful things with them.
Well, the way I started out making sculptures, period, was, again, I was teaching at the Newark School of Fine Art. Because of my composite sketch artist background, I started making color composites, and I got so good at it, they asked me to teach airbrushing at the Newark School of Fine Art. But I started making sculptures after the death of my favorite cousin, who was a New Yorker. She was one of the first wave of people that contracted AIDS in the 80s. So when she died, I started making these things, these memorials, to her. So I just went out. I was living down in Englishtown at the time, right down from the flea market with my family. And I went outside in the backyard, picked up a log, and I created this sculpture that was dedicated to her because I wanted to join her on her crossing into the afterlife. In the meantime, AIDS was exploding, crack was exploding. So I must have made 30 sculptures just dedicated to people that I knew. And eventually that turned into what I'm doing now. People ask, why do they still call you a self-taught artist? Because in the beginning, that's how I started out. I didn't know. I was making art purely to deal with grief and art as a healing process. I didn't know what I was doing. When I first took my sculptures into the Newark School of Fine Art, luckily I had a great man, Ted Bonavito, little Italian guy who became my teacher. And he says, I don't know what the hell you're doing, just don't stop. And he told me, don't go to school for it. Don't let anybody tell you what to do. Just keep doing them. And so I kept that in mind. This
That's
piece
wonderful.
here, that piece there was actually, that was in Jakarta, Indonesia, in the embassy. I had two of these masks that were sent over there and they were there for like a year. Then they got
Mhm.
bombed. And so they had to send them back, and they sent them back. It was covered with, soot and that kind of stuff. So I
Yeah.
just dusted it off a little bit and left it because again, that's energy, that's magic. Ultimately, in a lot of ways, when you start doing work like this, you're not only trying to make, one of the reasons I, again, fall on the self-taught is because initially, and even now, that I believe in magic. I believe that when you reclaim these objects and you make something out of them, they hold a residual power of the previous owner. If you find a broom out in the street, some mother or some father used that broom to sweep their house, and they, so it holds energy, it holds power, it
Yeah.
holds magic, and genetically it holds something. So I'm not totally crazy.
No, you're not. Genetically, it holds something from fingerprints. And,
Yes,
I do believe that too, that objects can, hold the spirit of the person who owns it. You kind of carry
absolutely,
it on in a sense.
absolutely. And when I moved to Newark, I moved to Newark in 1992. Newark was a ghost town. So Newark was Kmart. I used to take a shopping cart, tie my two pit bulls to the front of it, take my two kids, and we would be out at 1 o'clock in the morning picking up junk because it was over in Chestnut Street area, which is by McDonald's on 21. I mean, there was nothing. There was no cops. You know what I mean? Of course, I was still a police officer, so I walked around with a gun too. But still, we went out at night, and Newark was I like Newark, and this is gonna sound really selfish and stuff, but I kind of like the old Newark. There was a real, people are moving to Newark because they want to feed on the rawness and the realness and all that kind of stuff. But 20 years ago, it really was raw and it really was real.
I
Now
agree.
now they're living off of a ghost of what they think is still here. And again, I don't want to start lecturing, but people think they're bringing so much to Newark. Newark has always had it. Newark has put out gods and entertainment and art and music and poetry.
Yes.
You are coming here
Yes.
to feed off of what is already here. Okay, I'll
True.
stop. The paintings.
You're right.
So, and the paintings. I live above one of the oldest wood shops in Newark, old-fashioned windows in Millwork, and it's a classic Italian place, Italian and Portuguese place with master carpenters. Ronald Nitti has become my Theo. When I needed a place and nobody, it's hard for blacks to even rent an Ironbound. Let's not get me started on that. So Ron is a classic Italian, the classic Italians that had been here. But I knew him from living on Chestnut Street. He knows Willie, he knows the whole crowd. And so he
Okay.
rented me a place. I've been here 25 years. He's protected me, he supported me, you know. But again, when I want to make a place, my place is so full now. When I want to make a piece, I go down to Ron's wood shop downstairs. And I use his wood shop to do any sculptures. I haven't made a sculpture in a year, which is good too. It's good to change up. But this is his shop right here.
Oh,
He,
okay.
he makes only only wooden windows. And these are master carpenters. I can't tell you how much I've learned from watching those guys. So I go down and my first stop every day is coffee down at Ron's. So for many, many years. This is something that I'm working on. I've been working with, I had a show at the Mariposa Museum in Oak Bluffs, Martha's Vineyard. And
Mm.
I created a great bond with Carla, who's the director there. We're actually working on a teaching program using the cartoon author. We're going to create a contest where people will make artwork, submit it to the museum, and if they win, they'll get their work displayed at the museum.
Oh, that is excellent.
Hopefully Nork will join in. Nork has been very quiet on my cartoon author. I haven't heard a thing out of him. So hopefully,
Well, hopefully that'll change.
yeah, hopefully that will change. And we could go
I,
round and round.
I
I guess
have
this is,
a question here. Since you were inspired to start creating things sort of as a memorial to your lost ones, as a form of therapy. Someone asked if they could have suggestions on how they could utilize art and the
Yes.
creative process to assist with mental health clients.
I mean, speaking of that, this is the first sculpture I did dedicated to my cousin Carol, who died. And she died of AIDS, and she was a New Yorker. She lived 1270 Fifth Avenue and 108th Street. And anyway, she died at the Cardinal Cook Hospital, which at that time was full of all of these minority women, all these women of color dying of AIDS, and we didn't know what it was. So you had to put on a yellow hospital gown with the mask and all this, all this kind of stuff. So her mother, my Aunt Vanell, was the director of the New Lincoln School in New York, which is the school that was set up for blacklisted communists. It was run by Faith Ringo, Robert Rauschenberg, Zero Mostel. All of the kids attended this school. Matter of fact, Thelma Golden was mentored by my aunt. Thelma Golden, Susan E. Pass, and Adrian Piper. They all came out of my aunt's school, and that was her mother. So anyway, so this is the piece. She turned to Santeria before she died, and her mother couldn't stand it. So when she died, her mother gave me her tools from Santeria, and I put them on this sculpture. That's a log that I picked up in my backyard, and I created a piece. I don't even know how or why or how I did it, but this is solid cement. If you ask me how I did it now, I know I did it, but I won't tell you. Anyway,
it's incredible.
I'm babbling on. But that again, my Aunt Vanell was the one in the family that picked up on the art. So, matter of fact, at a funeral, she was so big in New York that she had a funeral at the New York Historical Society because her boss was, God, I can't remember his name, Richard Gelder. So she wound up working for the Gelder Foundation. And I got to see Thelma after 40 years. Thelma was closer to her sister because they were, the same sort of age and stuff.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow. Well, we have a couple of comments. It's one is, Kevin, you are like an alchemist. So great to see your work and hear about New York history.
Thank you.
And another is great tour and conversation. So fascinating. Another person says that they're a big fan of the Innocence Project. From Kelsey, love your paintings. And congratulations, Kevin. This is a fantastic talk and tour. Thank you for sharing so much. I think your sculpture is very painterly with color and almost liquid quality as one element connects to the many. Could you talk a little bit about your process from collecting materials to the moment your expression has taken form? Thank you so much.
Okay, before I get to that one, I have to, because I'm going to get yelled at. That video was recorded by, I think, Nork's, okay, I won't say the best, but he is, by Caesar Melgar, who's like in his studies now. This guy's a force of nature. I told him since he was 15, he's in his studies now. He just got picked up by one of the biggest Latino galleries in the world, but he's Nork born and raised. He did the video, which we sent to the American Museum of Folk Art to be edited. My process, again, I used to go with my kids and we would walk around and pick up stuff. I'll find that one piece, and from that first piece, I'll build everything off of it. The fascinating thing about found object art is that when I would need a piece, I would walk outside and walk around the block and it would be on the ground. There was one time when I found this broken guitar that had been shattered, and it took me a month to find all of the pieces, but every night I went out, I would find another piece until I was able to, reconstruct that guitar. So it becomes a magical thing. I really believe, my granddaughter's 7, and one of the first things we do when I go to her house is we make magic wands, and we cast spells, and because it's so good. If you put enough time in, you learn how to draw. If you have, some semblance of talent. But the imagination, that's a whole different skill. So my daughter, again, handed her to me at 2 weeks old. She said, okay, here, Dad, I'm going back to work. And so I wound up being there every day with her until, really until the pandemic hit. And what I wanted to instill most of her is magic and imagination. And boy, does she have imagination, because she spent 7 years with Crazy Papa. You know what I mean?
Oh
I don't
no,
know if
she
that answers
sounds
your
like a
question.
lucky, she sounds like a lucky little girl.
Oh no, that's
Sounds like you have a great relationship.
that's a joy. That's my joy of my life. You know.
All right, we have a couple of comments. Love the paintings. It's from Heather Craig. From Roger Wing, loving your studio stories, loving your studio and stories, magical. Thanks for sharing. And from Omawale Morgan, I am in New Jersey and I look forward to learning more about you and your work. Your work and your energy is very encouraging. Stay creative. And from Jesse Lewis, I am proud that I got to know your sister Donna, who I went to school with, and to learn more about your art. It's amazing.
Oh, thanks everyone. Thank you. Nork is, I'm like Nork's hidden secret. Nork hasn't, I think I scare folks in Nork because I'm a grumpy old man. So normally I hide. I don't, I hang out at a couple places in Nork, Rutgers with Ananda Bell and the Quabba Gallery. Laura came to me Laura came to me 3 years before she actually got that gallery going. And she talked to me about her, Laura is all about community. And I was a part of the PSE&G project where they hung, the stuff up on the wall there. And Laura came to me that day and she says, hey, you inspired me. I'm going to start a gallery. And I'm like, well, I take down my number if you do. And 2 years later, I get another phone call. Hey, I got the gallery. So when she started out, I did everything I could to, help her get started because Laura is amazing. You know what I mean?
I've had the pleasure of visiting there once in the community, which is what I love about the Aquaba Gallery. Are they open now?
Yeah, they're open. She was going under, but we raised so much hell that help is starting to come in because there's no place that loves community like Laura. I mean, that's what I'll get tears in my eyes with. That's what she's all about. So I'll do anything for Aquaba.
All right, one last comment right now so we can move into your PowerPoint. Joanne, sending this from YouTube. Amazing, very deep, emotional work.
Thank you.
So I'm going to let you move on with your PowerPoint presentation now.
All right.
Looking forward.
Okay. We're gonna. Okay, this piece is called Blue Meat. I did this in 1994. It's in the collection of the American Museum of Folk Art. It's called Blue Meat because my father once told me during the Depression they were so poor that they had to eat crows, and crows had blue meat. So on the top of this piece is actually a Garden of Eden. There was two artists in Newark, Ben and Holly Cerno, they're still here, who actually live with us on Chestnut Street too. They were camping in Montana and they found the neck of an elk, and they shipped it all the way back to me from Montana, and I built this piece out of that. These are close-ups. This piece, John Forster, who's a big genius curator out in the Midwest, sent me all these bogles, bangles, and beads, and I created this piece. It's the Pearl in 1997. This is Red Stripe. In the early 90s, my gallery dealer, who was Randall Morrison, he's like my brother, genius of a man, took me with him to Jamaica to collect artwork from, they call them in Jamaica, it's a nasty name, the Toothless, who are the self-taught artists in Jamaica. And so we actually drove the island, I drove the island of Jamaica twice, and we visited artists all over Jamaica. And in Kingston, we hung out with David Boxer and Patrona Morrissey, I mean, the big Jamaican names, and then we hung out with artists like Raz Dizzy and Everett Brown, artists that have gotten very, very big now, but it was a life-changing experience. Red Stripe is the beer that they drink in Jamaica. This is a guitar. I got fixated on guitars. I go through periods. So I would find these broken guitars, reassemble them, and create pieces. This piece, in 2011, the American Museum of Folk Art put together a team of artists. We were supposed to be like the icons in the self-taught art world. Lonnie Holly, Mr. Imagination, Charlie Lucas, myself, and we were supposed to be accompanied by four of the master graffiti artists. So we were all set to go to Venice and spend a month there. A week before we were set to go, the American Museum of Folk Art almost collapsed. They lost their building, everything went on. We still decided to go to Venice. We still spent 5 weeks in Venice. We still wound up having a small show there. And when I came back, I created this piece dedicated to Venice. Lonnie Holly, 5 weeks with Lonnie Holly is a life-changing experience. I mean, there's nobody like him. So I just sat at his feet and just watched this guy work. I've never seen anything like it to this day. He's another one like my brother. Is this a photo or the video? Oh. This piece, and I can't think of the name of it because it's complicated. One of my ships. This piece is dedicated. This is my haunted ship. The Crown. Oh, there's a name. Good. Crown. I can't pronounce it. Yeah. Well, this piece, that ship was carrying a whole cargo of slaves, and it sunk with over 200 slaves on board. So I often wondered about this ghost ship at the bottom of the ocean, with all these bodies of slaves. So that's dedicated to them.
I think that was the Crown Prince in Modern Heroics, our exhibition, I think maybe like 2016.
No, the next one.
Oh,
the next one. Yeah, this one.
Oh, the Majet.
Yeah, this one's in the collection of the Newark Museum, the Majet. Again, I was thinking of a spiritual journey by Egyptian god king, crossing the river Styx. Yes, crossing the river. So that's what inspired this one. This is, I'm trying to think of the year, 2017, we were invited to the Andrew Elgin Gallery in New York. Andrew Elgin owns the Outsider Fair. He's an icon. I mean, he's a genius man he runs Outside Art Fair. His gallery's off the hook. He invited 4 or 5 different muralists into his gallery to do, in 7 days and 7 nights, we had to create these murals, and then he was going to move the gallery, then the gallery moved. But I brought the Newark crew. My adopted son is James Wilson, skateboard, Cesar Melgar, Manuel Acevedo, and Jerry Gant. And we did this mural, 7 days and 7 nights. And the critics went crazy over it. If you look down the bottom, that's all Jerry Gant. You know what I mean? With Jerry, because Jerry could sit and write nonstop without pause. When Jerry was doing that, all the other muralists, and they were big boys, like Elbow Toe, Rigo 21. And they just came over and sat with Jerry trying to figure out, how he did it, So Jerry became like a star. Yeah, Jerry Gant was something else.
Yeah, I have had the pleasure of meeting Jerry. He had a wonderful personality, and I just love everything that he did. It's such a loss that he's no longer with us.
Yes, it is.
Jerry Gant. But that's an amazing work.
Oh, no, thank you. Jerry Gant was Newark. Him and Rodney, you could still feel them. They were what Newark was. I won't get on what it is. Okay, this boat, I went to Mystic Seaport. I did the inaugural residency there. In fact, I helped them set up, what I've been doing now is setting up residencies, because I've done so many now, I can do them standing on my head. So they gave me a really ancient skiff, and they let me walk around the shipyard and collect whatever I wanted. They had never done that before. And I was able to collect all that stuff is hundreds of years old, and they let me play in it,
Wow.
And I built that boat's probably 15 feet. Cesar Melgar, again, came up to help me because I'm not as young as I used to be. See, one of the problems with Newark is the mentoring. The mentoring just stinks here. What I was able to do with some of these young artists is you have to walk them from teenage years into college, after college, and then walk them into New York. See, everybody in Newark is all dressed up with no place to go. There's only but so many galleries here. You lost Algira, So after you show here 15 times, what do? I can't tell you how many artists I know now in their 40s that have finally figured out they've had to flee Newark because you just get caught in this cycle of,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm trying
Unfortunately,
to
we did.
stop,
We lost Elvira, and I think City Without Walls as well, right?
City Without Walls. I don't know if it came back, but I did a lot with City. I was on the board of City Without Walls years ago. But
Mm,
I love City Without Walls now. Gyra. I mean, how do you replace Gyra and Victor? I
yes.
mean, how do you let that go? Okay,
Yeah,
let's move
sad.
on. I mean, and so I mean, Newark has a great art scene now. You have a lot of young people. You are drinking lots of coffee, eating lots of cheese and crackers and all that kind of stuff. But Newark has great grant writers and not enough visionaries and not enough teachers. And I've screamed for years, you got to teach what I'm about is community, teaching these kids and getting them into the next step. You got to hold their hands and pull them along, you know what I mean? And kick them
Mm-hmm.
sometimes and get
Yeah,
them there. Otherwise,
yeah.
all the show of art and all the cuteness means absolutely nothing if it's not being passed on.
You're right.
Oh, this is the USS Enterprise. I'm a Star Trek fan, so.
I was going to ask if the title referred to that show.
Yeah, I'm watching Picard. I love Star Trek. I'm watching Picard now. Yeah, I love it. Star Trek. If you saw, okay, with all that was going on with the Black Lives Matter movement last summer? God, last year.
Yes,
I was
last year.
invited by the Mariposa Museum in Oak Bluffs, Martha's Vineyard, which is the Black Center of Martha's Vineyard. They wanted me, because of the fact that I'm a retired police officer, and because of my civil rights background, they wanted me to come up and make a piece. So this piece is The Legend of Flying Africans, Black Lives Matter. The Legend of Flying Africans is about a group of African slaves that took over the slave ship. They killed the slave master. They wound up landing someplace in Georgia. And so the slaves, did you hear about them? Yeah, so the slaves
Yeah,
got off
this
the
is
ship.
similar to the Ebo landing. It happened in St.
Yes,
Simeon, Georgia.
yes. And so they left the boat, and the chief decided that we're not going to become slaves. You're not going to have us. And so they walked into the water and drowned themselves. But the other slaves that are on plantations nearby said that's not how it happened. They said that those slaves walked into the water, they grew wings, and they flew back to Africa. And so I wanted to relate that to the Black Lives Matter movement with these kids that aren't going to take what my generation took. And so I created this piece. Some of the stuff from Mystic Seaport, some of the stuff I've had 30 years, and some of the stuff people from Martha's Vineyard, the Black community came out. They dropped stuff at my feet, and I was able to build this boat.
That's wonderful. I love that. I love the story behind it.
Thank you. I mean, this is my favorite doll. There's a doll on top of that, which I keep with me at all times.
Can we go back one?
This doll I made 30 years ago. None of the women in my family like dolls. They hate them. If my daughter would see this doll, oh my God. If I bring that near my daughter, she'll scream. My granddaughter doesn't like my dolls either. But I carry this doll wherever I go. And I just got her back. She's sitting on the shelf behind me. But she's like my charm, my lucky charm, and she wards off evil. So I can always keep her near me when I can.
Okay.
I started again painting, and I started out, painting. The beautiful thing about art is how much you learn. And so I had to go back to my illustration days and work myself out of it. So this is one of the first paintings that I did. Initially, I was doing gods and myths and that kind of stuff. It's evolved. If you looked at the paintings I did now after 67, the different universes.
Yeah, it's lovely.
Oh, thank you. Again, because my family is so multicultural. My son-in-law is a classic Italian Cuban from Staten Island. So my granddaughter's abuela comes over and teaches us Spanish. Nancy Dominguez Lombardi. My godson's from the Philippines. Most of my students are Latino now. And so I very much identify with, my father told me very early on, you can't just be, if you're for black rights, you got to be for gay rights, you got to be for brown rights, you got to be for yellow rights. You just can't pick and choose, you got to be for all rights. So what happened on the border so deeply disturbed me that I got obsessed with when I saw those little kids in fences and cages, I about
Yes.
lost my mind. So that inspired me, a lot of these paintings. And again, I spent almost 2 months total time in Italy. I mean, I was just in Italy last summer. Cesar Melgar and myself were invited to Atena, Italy, which is a province of Rome, 20 miles out of Rome. It's a 1,000-year-old city. And we were
Mm.
invited by a group of architects and engineers from all over the world that wanted to get together and meet and figure out how to make better cities. And so the landscape in Atena was so beautiful that it inspired a whole series of paintings with the Italian landscape.
That's beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Is that the last one?
Oh, okay. Well, it's time for questions. Trisha Bloom asked, Kevin, are you going to write an illustrated biography?
I hate Cesar, don't get mad at me. Cesar Melgar has been photographing me since he was 16 years old. He's 36 now. So I told him the other day and he yelled at me. I'm like, when I drop dead, you have all the information on me. You have all the stuff for a book, so keep those photos. But, I love to write, and I've written in a few magazines now and stuff like that. One day I'll get to it, but right now I'm on this painting and I'm so obsessive, I can't stop. So I have to wear myself out. My daughter laughs and said it's your ADHD when it kicks in. You get this really hyper, I can work like a madman. So once the paintings calm down, I'll get to it sooner or later.
Okay. An anonymous question. Can you talk about your work that's in the Newark Museum collection? I think we did show a slide of the Majek.
Yeah, they got one piece. You could buy a lot more, It's sitting over here. You just saw. So Newark Museum, come for a nice studio visit and buy about 10 more pieces.
All right.
Newark is a strange place with me. I don't know what I've done to Newark, but I must terrify them. Because Newark doesn't, how do you put it? I mean, me and Jeremy Johnson, I call Jeremy up to laugh with him. Me and Jeremy would talk every, a couple times a week,
Yes.
But round and around Newark has, maybe because I've kept my art life is in New York. And so part of it is my fault that I had a gallery so early and I spent so much time in New York. And then you come back to a city and they don't really know you. And it's like when the cartoon came, but I'm like, don't you want to put this in your schools? Don't you want little brown kids to know that maybe one day they could be in the cartoon? I didn't think I would be in the cartoon, but it's inspiration. Newark is a very, I don't want to call it incestuous, but it's an incestuous place. They pick and choose. And I'm part of a generation that is leaving. I'm Rodney and Jerry and Gladys Growler. Gladys would see me and punch me in the stomach, every time she saw me. She was threatening to beat me up, but that was, my generation. And there's a lot of young, hip, cool coffee shop cats, a lot of influencers. But again, I'm more interested in how we can serve the community and how, most of all, we can make good art. When the Newark School of Fine Art was there, you never had any doubt about what good art was, because they had so many masters in there. Gregory Gervich, Bradford Brown, Don Miller. I mean, you knew what good art was. Now there's, I don't know what the test is. I think it's how many likes you get on Instagram. You know what I mean? And we have to return to making good art, and that comes from mentoring, and we don't do that. We're so interested in preparing the space for the realtors to come and push us out that, we're not concentrating on our kids enough. So.
Well, hopefully that's something that can change.
Yeah, I mean,
get inspired by what you're saying now. Or
well, I mean, that's your generation now. I'm done. I'm gonna find me a nice bench someplace, do my little paintings and feed the pension. Fortunately, I taught so many young people, 30 years of young people who are still here working in Newark. Cortez and Joya, all of them are my students. I taught them years and years ago, and they're all out there. So Cesar Melgar, it's time for them to fight. You know what I mean? I did, like my father said years ago when they started picking, I'm marching again. He's like, I'm not marching anymore. He's like, I'm marching in the 60s, 70s. I'm not marching in the 80s. And Kevin's just about done. So when I get these little chances like this to yell and scream, then, I enjoy it. I mean, I love Newark. I love Newark for its energy. I love Newark for different reasons than a lot of people do. I love Newark for its people. You know what I mean? And
Newark is the
unless
people.
and unless we're helping them, none of this matters. You know, half of these little influencers be gone in a week. You know, the
Yeah.
good ones will remain, the dedicated ones that put some work into their craft. You know, young people nowadays want to make 10 paintings, and I'm an artist. You know, buy a skateboard. I'm a skateboarder. You take a camera. I'm a photographer. Now put in the work. I'm
Yeah.
tired of looking at that mess. Not just I'm in Newark. I'm talking about generally all over the place, all over the
There's
country.
there's a question. Do you see the lack of art classes in public schools as a detriment to developing the next generation of artists?
Absolutely, absolutely. And again, you got an artist that's an author teaching kids, but you're not promoting it. You're missing something else.
It's great.
Boggles my mind. It boggles my mind. You know, and the other cities are picking up. I have to go to Martha's Vineyard to teach classes. I have to go back to my hometown. I'm already involved with those school systems, you know, but here in Newark, where we need it the most, you don't want to know nothing. But that's all right.
One
I'm doing
person
fine.
here, Eve Mantel, said she's curious about the size of your paintings. Thank you so much.
My paintings, all of them are 16 by 20. I wanted to be consistent with the size, but I just ordered new canvases from Michael, so I'm going to slowly start inching up. But at this, you know, people talk, Randall Morris, the owner, Kevin Morris, told me a long time ago, he said, people of color usually wind up living with the work. You know what I mean? I paint in front of my TV while I'm watching CNN. You know, a lot of people have, a lot of my friends, I won't talk about y'all, you know, they have these studios. I have to go to the studio. You know, my house is my studio. You know, wherever I'm at is my studio. I sit out front and paint. You know, I don't need, you know, I paint wherever I'm at.
Yeah.
So but these paintings are 16 by 20. I just did a website, so they'll be up for sale soon. See, the paintings I retain control of, so I can sell the paintings. Anything sculptural has to go through my gallery. So
okay. We have one last question. Referring to the Author Project, I was wondering if you could talk about the Author Project. We loved watching it with my son. He's now 25 and loves seeing your work virtually. I love you teaching because children that age do believe in magic.
Yeah, well, the author, what we're doing now with the Mariposa Museum in Carla, we're setting up, I think I mentioned it earlier, we're going to actually, we just wrote the grant, we're trying to wait to hear back, but we're actually going to set up a contest with kids, school kids at different ages, and school kids, high school kids, and then working artists. We're going to set up a contest where people go out and make found object art, and we're still figuring out what the prize is going to be. But it's probably going to be for the older artists, you know, not a show, but to have your work featured at the museum. You know, for the younger ones, we're working with the author producers. So the younger ones, it may be a whole series of author books and things like that.
Oh,
At a certain point, you know, and so we're actually working on that as we speak. And I have, again, the mayor of Elizabeth actually called me a couple months ago, and I'm waiting to, once it's done, we're going to send it to him, and they're going to put it out in the school systems there. I'm hoping that Newark will do the same thing, but, you know, that's a hope.
Let's hope.
Yeah, let's hope.
Well, I have to say, I'm sorry.
My sister's texting me, stop, Kevin, calm down. All right.
I have to say, it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I really hate that we don't have any more time because it's just gone by so quickly, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm quite sure our viewers have as well. And it's just been such an insightful look into your practice, Kevin, and I just want to thank you so much for joining us. It's been wonderful.
Thank you. It's been a blast and an excuse to run my mouth. So, you know, I could talk for another 3 hours, but you better let me go. But thank you. You've been very, very kind. And thanks to the audience. Thanks for your questions.
Thank you. Yes, and thank everyone for joining us from home, and that we hope you had a wonderful experience on this virtual studio tour with artist Kevin Sampson. And the Newark Museum could not do these programs without your generosity and your support. So please consider making a donation or becoming a member of the museum. And don't miss our other great virtual programs we have coming up. On Saturday, May 15th, we have Community Day Art Extravaganza.